Hi, I am Margarita Tarragona. I'm a psychologist. I live in Mexico City. I specialize in positive psychology, and I am very happy to be part of this event of this World Happiness Fest in collaboration with the Whole Being Institute, which is an organization that I hold very dear to my heart. Thank you to Enrique and to the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this event. I would like to share with you some thoughts about our stories, life stories, and the role that they play and they can play to enhance human flourishing. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. So as I said, the topic is life stories and human flourishing. And for me, this brings together two areas that I've been working on for many years and that I really find fascinating. On the one hand, positive psychology, which I'm sure you know, is the scientific study of what helps people thrive. What are the components of a life well lived? It also sometimes in shorthand is described as the psychology of happiness, the psychology of well-being. What's most important, in my opinion, is to stress that it's based on scientific research about what allows individuals and communities to live fully. And then the other area that I'm very interested in is narrative psychology, which is a movement within psychology, especially in cognitive psychology, that studies the importance of how we story or narrate our experiences. And what I would like to share with you are some ideas about how we can incorporate narrative psychology into our work with positive psychology, either as professionals or in our own lives, to strengthen those components that bring us joy, that bring us happiness, that bring meaning to our existence. Of course, you know, our species is called Homo sapiens. And some authors say that it could just as well be called Homo narrativus, because narrating, telling stories is a central part of human experience. And by stories, I don't mean just stories that we make up, the products of our imagination, but a way of organizing our experiences so that it makes sense to us. And this turns out to be oftentimes as stories. We organize what we live, what we feel, what happened to us. We tend to organize it as if it were a story. What do I mean by that? As a series of events that are connected over time. Most of us do not experience our life as discombobulated happenings. For us, things are connected over time. And that's the way we understand our life. It used to be that the term narrative was almost exclusively used in the world of literature. You would take a class on narrative, you were studying English literature or Spanish literature. But nowadays, you hear about narrative medicine. Of course, we hear a lot about narratives and storytelling in marketing, in branding. We talk about storytelling in terms of political parties. So the notion of narratives and storytelling has expanded to many areas of our lives. But the main concepts do come from the world of literature. And here, a very basic depiction of what's a story from the perspective of literature is that, as I said, it's a series of events that are connected, and they tend to have a structure. The structure usually has an introduction, a development of characters, of conflicts, of what's going on, a climax, and then a resolution. This, of course, is very simple. Most stories have many plot lines and many things that are happening, that are ebbing and flowing, that have climaxes and resolutions, and they have different emotional intensities. I love this picture. You know what it is? It's something written by J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, and it's all of the different subplots of one of the Harry Potter books. So there are many characters and there are many things going on, many things developing. And I like it because our lives tend to be more like this, than the previous slide, we don't have just one plot line in our lives. We have many plot lines. There's something going on with us at work, maybe as managers or as graduate students. There's the story of what's going on with our partner, if we're in a romantic relationship, our story of us as parents, as children, as citizens. There's many stories going on, and these are all intertwined, and they are complex, of course. And the beauty of narrative, say some authors, among them Dan McAdams, I'm sorry, I got confused. Dan McAdams, who's one of the main researchers about identity and narratives at Northwestern University, he says that the beauty of narratives is that they can bring together and integrate a lot of complex information in a way that is much harder to convey by graphs and numbers. Of course, there's room and it's important to have graphs and numbers, but our experience that is nuanced and complex oftentimes is better explained in terms of narratives. A very important character in the study of narratives in psychology was Jerome Bruner, who was an American cognitive psychologist. And he proposed that even though our brains do work as computers for many functions, there are other functions that computers do not do, or in his time did not do as well. And they have to do with creating meaning. And the way we create meaning is through these stories that we construct. And he said something very powerful, that we become the narratives that we construct to tell our lives. What does this mean? That when we narrate something, we're not just transmitting information, like output of information for somebody else. As we convey our experience, we're also constructing or reshaping or tweaking our experience. One of my mentors, Harlene Anderson, has this concept that I like very much. She says that the self, our identity, is an ongoing autobiography. Or to be more exact, it is a self-other, multifaceted biography that we constantly pen and edit. So our story is not like, you know, if you've seen like the rings in a tree where you have, as the years go by, there are different rings, or if you look at the geological formations in a canyon or in a mountain that has been cut, you see the different stages of the life of those beings. It's not the same for human beings. In our case, it's not like each stage is already set in stone or sedimented, but we're constantly reviewing our experiences. And we often do it as we tell them to other people. And together we are rewriting or reinforcing our life stories. And these are important because they become our identity. They are the way that we understand who we are. Dan McAdams, whom I just mentioned a minute ago, is a very important researcher. And he says that identity is an internalized and evolving story of the self that explains how I came to be the person that I am becoming. I know this is grammatically complex, but think about it. I really like it. How I came to be the person that I am becoming, not the person that I am, because who we are is not fixed. It's not like the peak of a mountain that we reach and then we're there and we settle there. We are constantly becoming. And I really like this notion of becoming because it speaks of possibilities. There are some things that are more stable in our lives, but there are things that are more subject to how we want to align who we are with our values, with our dreams, with our purpose. So this notion that my identity is a story that I have internalized, and at the same time it is evolving, and it explains how I came to be who I am today. And who I am today is part of the process of becoming. So I love the sense that we're under construction. I don't know if there's a single author, but there's a quote that I love that says that you can be in construction and a masterpiece at the same time. I really like that idea because I think it's important in our own lives, as in our work as coaches, as educators, as therapists, to see the masterpiece that each person already is, and at the same time to realize that we are all always under construction. So that tension or apparent contradiction between acceptance and embracing who we are and appreciating the beauty and the light of every person, and at the same time honoring the desire to become more self-actualized or to become better versions of ourselves, I think is an important, I don't know whether to call it a duality or just a reality, that there's both parts and they're both important in who we are. Our identity from the psychological perspective has cognitive aspects, the way, as I was saying, the way we construct our experience into narratives. It has a developmental aspect, and it also has to do with personality traits. Researchers have found that this sense of identity of who we are tends to emerge most clearly in our teenage years. So there's a certain, if you take a life cycle perspective, it really becomes stronger in our teenage years, but it's always being developed. And something very important is that we are constantly telling our stories, and there's different contexts in which we can do it. Most of the time, we do it informally. When we talk to our friends, to our family members, when we don't say, okay, so now I'm going to tell you the story that contributes to my identity. It's a more fluid process. Whenever you're, if you have a problem with your boyfriend and you tell your girlfriend about it, you're telling a story, and the way she reacts may invite you to reconsider the way you're interpreting what happened, or may reinforce the way you interpret what happened. Or when you're, talking with your family members, I think this is a very important part of identity construction. When you're sitting at the table with your uncles and aunts and your cousins, maybe your grandparents, you're hearing family stories, you're hearing about the history of your family, and you're also, people ask you, so what are you up to these days? What do you want to be when you grow up? All of these informal conversations are constantly interacting with the narrations and the stories we have about ourselves. And then there's also more formal context. When you go to therapy or to coaching, you have a more structured environment in which one of the goals is to tell your story. Different therapeutic modalities have different ideas about why retelling your story works. Psychodynamic perspective, for example, thinks that your childhood experiences are very formative and color, and to some extent determine who you are as an adult. Cognitive behavioral approach may emphasize how you may have distorted ideas or distorted way of thinking that made you create a story that may be more pessimistic than it needs to be. Logotherapy is a type of therapy that emphasizes how your story contributes to your sense of meaning and purpose. So there's many, many different ways of telling your story, but telling your story is a central part of therapeutic and coaching processes, because in all of these stances, it helps you to create meaning or to reconsider the meaning you have given to some experience, in some cases to reframe it and come up with a richer story. One of the elements of an approach called narrative therapy is that oftentimes we have a dominant story that is a very simplified description of who we are, and often problematic. It often gets in the way of us being how we prefer to be. And through the conversation with therapists, we can find other threads to that story that can make it richer, sometimes they say thicker, and find alternative stories. So for example, you have a story about yourself in which you feel incompetent, you feel that you don't have much of a future. It wouldn't help very much if the therapist just told you, no, you're very competent, of course you have a future, see you next week. What a therapist usually would do is to ask questions about times when you have been competent, about times where you have experienced success, where you have been proud of what you've done. And through that, find seeds of alternative stories, of stories in which you do not see yourself as incompetent, but in which you can see yourself as capable and competent. There's this phrase by an philosopher, Ernst von Glasersfeld, who used to say, believing is seeing. It's kind of a play on words of the famous saying that seeing is believing. What he meant by this is that the expectations that we have, the beliefs that we have, may determine what we notice and what we see. And this is where I think positive psychology can be beautifully combined with narrative psychology. Why? Because positive psychology has different ways of operating. One of them at its broadest is a philosophical stance, an orientation towards people and towards life that believes that what is good is as real and as important as what is painful, as what is difficult. Csikszentmihalyi has been quoted as saying that positive psychology is a metaphysical orientation towards the good. So in a way, if we take that philosophical perspective, it's like the stage in which our life is played. And the backdrop is the belief that what is good, what is beautiful, what is luminous is as real as what is painful and what is difficult. It's not wearing rosy glasses that say that there's no troubles, everything is wonderful. No, but it is to also shine the light on what works well, what is good, what is right in people's lives. So positive psychology can help us as a general perspective in our approaches to other people and to ourselves. And then there's different models of well-being within positive psychology. There's the SPIRE model proposed by Tal Ben-Shahar. There's Felicia Cooper's Fluorishing model. There's different ones. The one that I work with the most is the PERMA model proposed by Martin Seligman. It's a model of well-being that proposes that there's 5 components of well-being, that for most people, a full life includes experiencing positive emotions, being engaged in what we do, having good relationships with others, having meaning in life, and having a sense of achievement or accomplishment. I often like to depict it adding this ring around the PERMA model to represent strengths, character strengths, because Seligman and Christopher Peterson have said that strengths, character strengths, color and interact with every component of well-being. So what we have here are certain maps or of elements that it's useful to explore when we think about our own story and when we're accompanying people as they explore their stories. This exercise proposed by Seligman invites us to think about our well-being as we would experience like the dashboard of a plane or a car, and invites us to think, how full is our tank in terms of our positive emotions? How are we doing in terms of how engaged we are in our activities? Do we experience flow, those moments of complete absorption in what we're doing? How are our relationships? How much meaning are we finding in life? How do I feel I'm doing in terms of my goals and my achievements? So just having a conversation about this, either with ourselves or with other people, opens up many possibilities for storytelling. Like, why am I having a lot of positive emotions lately? If you ask me, I can tell you that my children were just here visiting and that made me feel very happy. Or how engaged am I? Well, maybe I'm preparing a class that I'm very excited about and I'm very engaged. Or maybe I could tell you at a different point, I'm worried, I'm feeling very disengaged, I'm bored at work, or I'm feeling anxious. So just doing this exercise of assessing how you're doing in each of these areas can be the starting point of many interesting stories that you can explore, usually with somebody. And it's always important to explore people's stories about all of these elements of well-being with curiosity and appreciation. It's useful to be like reporters, to find out about who, what, where, when, and with whom. So for example, as I was saying, I've been very happy because my children were here. Well, who are your children? Who are the ones who came? What happened when they were here visiting? Where were they? Well, they were here at home with me. When was this? Well, it was this past month. So we get information about the facts, as good reporters do, but also about the meaning. What was important about this? Well, they live in another country, so for me it was especially meaningful that we spend time together. What did it mean to me? Well, that we're still close even if we're far away, or to see them developing as adults and developing in their professions. What does it say about you? How does this fit with things that you value? I really value my family. So asking questions about the meaning of the facts or the events helps us create stronger stories. Maybe the facts are just like bullet points, but when we inquire about meaning, then they begin to really take shape as stories. And the best stories and the best storytelling and the best inquiry processes have to do with zigzagging. This is something that narrative therapists say, zigzagging between what happens and what it means. So we can also inquire about stories of flow. When people are in flow, when they're completely absorbed and engaged in what they're doing. When does this happen? Doing what? For example, for this young woman, when it paints, we can find out about how she learned to paint, what is the story of painting in her life, what painting has meant for her. We can also, if we follow the different elements of PERMA, we can also inquire about strengths. Once we have we take a strengths test, or we ask our partner to take it, or you're a teacher, if you ask your students to take the test, you can have incredible conversations about their strengths. What do they think about the results of the test? In this case, for example, this young man has zest as his main strength. We could ask how zest shows up in his life. Does he like being zestful? What impact does his zest have on other people, on his projects? You can ask many, many questions. And by the way, it's especially important to have a vocabulary of strengths, because it helps us have more colors to paint, so to speak. It gives us a broader palette to understand our experience and the experience of others. We can also explore people's dreams and values, what they want for the future, who they want to be, what kind of person they want to be. And here, there's research that shows that writing about how you see yourself in the future, for example, the best possible self exercise developed by Laura King, can be very helpful. And also to write about difficult experience. James Pennebaker is a researcher who has studied the value of writing about traumatic experiences, and how when people write about the traumatic experiences, not immediately, but after some time has gone by, and when they write about both their feelings and their thoughts about the traumatic experience, it's more likely that they will feel better. And Laura King has also studied writing, in her case, writing about intensely positive experiences, and how when people do this, they also experience enhanced well-being, and also writing about the future. She created an exercise that many of you probably know called the best possible self-exercise, in which she asks people to think about the time in the future when their life is going extremely well, when maybe they have reached some of the most important goals, when they feel very happy. And then to describe in detail where they are, what they're doing, who they are with. And she has found that doing this helps people feel more hope and experience more positive emotions and greater well-being. So to sum up, we've talked about how we tend to organize our life as a series of stories, how we usually write these stories in our conversations with others in ways that are informal and formal, that can be within our generation or intergenerationally. They take place within the context of a certain culture. And then we can also explore our stories in more formal contexts, such as therapy or coaching or counseling. And that we also write our stories, not metaphorically as we speak them, but also we can literally write them down, and this has benefits. So in essence, it's important to tell your story. And if you can tell it through a lens of appreciation, curiosity, and paying special attention to the components that positive psychology has shown to be important building blocks of well-being, chances are that your story will be enriched. It will help you have an identity that is closer to your preferred identity, and it can help you have a fuller, happier life. Thank you very much.